Senator Ben Sasse of Nebraska is on the Senate Judiciary Committee. He joins us now. Senator, we welcome you to this 700 Club.
Good morning. Thank you for the invite.
Could I ask you, what would be your description of an ideal Supreme Court judge?
Somebody who knows why they put a robe on every morning and understands our Constitution. So in our system, we have three branches of government in the founder's wisdom, and we distinguish between legislating, between executing those laws, and between the role of judging. And both legislators and the president and vice president can be hired and fired by the people every 2, 4, or 6 years. But a judge, they have a lifetime appointment, and they put on this black robe to cloak their partisan and policy preferences and their personal views. They underneath, they may have a red or a blue jersey when they were nominated, or they maybe had political views in the past. But on the court, that's not their job, and that's why they have lifetime tenure. And so we want somebody who defends the Constitution and the separation of powers and doesn't try to be a super legislator from the bench.
We've had judicial activism before. As a matter of fact, there are many people who think the Constitution isn't supposed to be interpreted according to what was written, but according to sociological trends. How do you view that?
Yeah, that's a very confused view of America. So we're skeptical in America of power because we know that the most important things in life happen not by compulsion, but by love. Where you raise your kids, where you persuade people to join your church, where you try to persuade somebody to buy your new product or design a new app with you. Most of what matters in America is voluntarism. And so we want a limited government where power is really hard to use. And so in our system, government can't just grow because a whole bunch of elites in Washington, D.C. want it to get bigger. If you want to change the Constitution, you have to formally amend it because the people have that power. We don't want judges trying to decide what the American government should grow to. We want we the people to retain the power.
What do you think the major question is going to be? I think Justice Ginsburg laid down the rule that they can't ask the judge how he or she will vote on any particular issue. Is that rule still pertain today?
I think it should, and I think you'll hear Judge Kavanaugh have a little bit of a tension in his soul a few times as he tries to answer questions today, because he's a teacher, right? He cares about passing on basic American civics to the next generation. He's been on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals for 12 years, but he's also been a law professor at both Harvard and Yale, and I think when he gets questions, he's going to want to lay out all the ways that Americans should think about these problems, and yet it's very important for a judge to not prejudge cases that are going to come before them in the future. So the Justice Ginsburg precedent that you reference, Reverend Robertson, he's going to say there are cases that are going to come before us, and I can't opine on them, but let's back up a little bit and say, what would the Constitution have to say to this matter, or what are the major cases that have been decided in the past? He, with now Justice Gorsuch, wrote a book on stare decisis, which is the principle about past Supreme Court decisions, and I think he'll talk a little bit about that today as well.
What about the argument that's being made by the Democrats, especially the minority leader of the Senate, saying the reason why we ought to delay these hearings? What do you think of that? How would you address that?
Yeah, so Leader Schumer's not telling the full truth on this matter, so let's get a few facts out there. Number one, this Judge Kavanaugh, has had more papers, more total documents submitted from his record than the last 5 nominees to the Supreme Court combined. Judge Kavanaugh, more papers submitted to our Judiciary Committee than the last 5 judicial nominees to the Supreme Court combined. All of his paper that's relevant to what we're doing has been rapidly coming into the committee. I think it's been 57 days since he was nominated, so we're starting this hearing about a week later than the last 3 justices have had their hearings started. What hasn't happened is every single thought that George W. Bush may have had as president hasn't been submitted to the committee because it's not relevant to this process. And what the Democrats have been trying to do is say, because Brett Kavanaugh, at a point in his past, he spent about 3 years as staff secretary of the White House, which is essentially the main secretarial role that serves the president with all paper that comes to the president or goes back out from the president to the cabinet officials. Those are not Brett Kavanaugh's documents. Those are George W. Bush's documents, and those documents were not things that Kavanaugh had a decision-making role on. So Democrats are trying to imply that there's been obstruction because we don't have every journal entry George W. Bush ever wrote. But again, there's more paper from Kavanaugh that's come in than the last 5 nominees combined. And the guy has served for 12 straight years on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. He's authored more than 300 opinions. More than 100 of them have been cited by his peers on 200 other judges on federal courts. That's a pretty good way to get a sense of what his judicial philosophy is.
Lindsey Graham thinks he'll pick up as many as 55 votes, that at least 3 or maybe 4 Democrats will vote for him. What's your view of that? You think he'll get that many?
You know, I'm not sure. Kavanaugh's a very impressive guy, and all the hyperventilating that we're seeing on liberal media about how the world's going to end and water will always be dirty and he hates clean air and he doesn't like women, children, or puppies, it's all silly, and people know it isn't true. And so I think after this hearing, you may see 5, 6, 7, 8 Democrats join with the Republicans, but I don't think you're going to see any Democrat be the 51st vote. It's a 50 Republican, 49 Democrat Senate right now, and I think it'll take every one of the 50 Republicans being on record before the first few Democrats join. But I think 55, 56, 57, that's a reasonable argument that Lindsey made.
Last question. Assuming he's on that court, what impact do you think when you've got Gorsuch now and Roberts, is that court going to turn dramatically, or will it just be a slight shift to the right?
You know, I think he's going to be a very important addition to the court. I usually try to resist Republican versus Democrat or right versus left views of the court, because I think what you and I both want is a court that isn't trying to advance policy preferences, but's trying to do the modest role of what a judge is empowered to do. And so I think when Judge Kavanaugh replaces Justice Kennedy on the bench, and again, the Supreme Court goes back into session at the end of the first week of October, and we need him to be on the court by then so they can start their work. I think there are a number of places where he's going to be in line with Kennedy. Kennedy was a big First Amendment defender, and we need that. We've seen that in the Colorado case of the baker trying to be compelled, for instance. But I think in addition, you're going to see Judge Kavanaugh more resistant than Kennedy was to trying to think about the evolution of mores in society. And I think that'll be a real welcome addition. So I think your viewers should applaud the president's nomination of Judge Kavanaugh, and I think we're going to see him on the court in a month.
Senator, thank you. Very concise, very cogent. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, sir.